to keep the click on though.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we won't be able to keep time.
Yeah, you better speak in time. All right.
Yeah.
Good luck, guys.
Thank you. Do we need luck?
I don't know if good luck is necessary in podcasting.
I feel like good luck before a podcast makes everybody nervous. Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Not good luck.
Okay.
Cool. Here we go.
Great. That's great. Well, this is the first time we've done a podcast because we're very modern here at Escape, and we're trying to keep up with the times. But mainly, we're welcoming in our friends and artists that come here and creatives, and following in this line of finding out what makes people tick, and finding out how they're getting along, and just generally having a good chit chat. So Romain Collin's here today, who's just performed an amazing 2 sets, one down by the Triangle and one in the studio, and it's really nice to have you here, man.
Nice to be here.
It's awesome.
It's an amazing place.
Yeah.
I heard a lot about it, and they weren't lying.
Yeah. So we met in Miami, and I basically said, come for dinner. And you kindly said, well, I'm going to come for dinner, and maybe we could do some music together or some performances.
Yeah. I was going to be on the West Coast anyway, because I live in New York. And I figured it'd be cool to just drive out here, check out the space, and see what happens. Then you mentioned that you sometimes do like sort of intimate shows. Mm-hmm. For people who are down to drive like 3 hours out from LA.
It's a bit of a drive.
But it's cool. So, it's beautiful too. And people came out yesterday, which is nice. Yeah. So we put together 2 sets. Yeah. One outdoors, ambient, all modular pretty much. And then one in the studio, piano and some synths. Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. Super fun.
Is that something that you've been doing more often recently, performing for people, small groups or?
Yeah, so it's funny because I feel like I either do like sort of bigger stages, bigger productions, or really intimate, and that's kind of what I've been doing. One or the other at this point. I just put out Dust, which is like a solo piano record.
Yeah, which we have a copy of here. The vinyl.
That's right.
This is also online and.
Yeah, it's on like all streaming platforms. Came out on Edition Records, and that's just solo piano, super super intimate record. Dust inspired by Playa Dust.
I was gonna.
And
I
Burning
thought that
Man.
might be it.
Yeah. And I've been working on solo piano music for a very long time. I've been recording for 8 years or so. It's kind of crazy. Usually, when I work on a record, I get in the studio, and we track for a couple of days, and then the record is done and will be released a few months after that on whatever label I'm working with. But like solo piano, I'd been tracking so much music for the past 8 years in various contexts, live stuff, studio stuff. I had so much music that I wasn't really completely happy with sort of what I was giving through the instrument. I wanted to play solo piano music that doesn't sound like solo piano music. It's hard to explain, but there's a lot of piano music that just sounds like somebody wants to play a lot of piano. And coming from like a contemporary jazz background and also classically trained, there's that temptation to just chops, like.
Had you had that kind of departure from your classical training into other areas before, or was it just a moment where you went, I need to break out of this and do something different?
I think it's been a gradual thing. If anything, classical music is still inhabiting and informing what I play on the piano more so than jazz in a way at this point. I still work on classical music quite a lot, both in terms of performing it, but also studying it and sort of breaking down the sort of harmonic vocabulary of whatever composer I'm working on. But so I think it's been a gradual sort of development of my approach to the piano. And it became Dust. A friend of mine had an upright piano he had just bought out in Brooklyn, and he was out on tour. I said, "Man, can you just give me the keys to your spot?" And set up a few mics and kind of I think I recorded that album in 4 or 5 hours.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So start to finish.
Yeah. Just did like a few takes of like a bunch of songs that I like. It's very much. It feels like. Being around, with friends around a campfire. Yeah. And sort of like strumming a song on the guitar or something like, you know what I mean? Like as opposed to like piano music.
Yeah.
And it came out. I think it came out good. It was very effortless in the creative process, and I sent it out to the label. They wanted to put it out right away, so
Yeah.
that's where it
It
became.
reminded me of Gonzalez. I think he goes by Chili Gonzalez, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think I was listening to that record probably in the 90s at some point.
Yeah.
And it is that upright thing with the middle pedal on, and
You get the felt tone.
You can hear all the motion inside the piano as well.
Yeah. I think we pushed it extra hard in the production. Like my friend Jeremy Lucas, who's an amazing producer engineer.
Yeah.
Came by and checked out the setup, and he really he buried the mics in the piano. We put mics at the bottom right next to the sustain pedal and all that stuff. You really
could hear it.
You hear everything, man. Yeah. But it's a vibe.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. It's really. I'm really excited to put it. We have vinyl players around the ranch, so I'm excited to listen to it.
Yeah.
On cool. And then also you've been working on Foss. Which is another project.
Yeah, that's another project that is fundamentally an audiovisual performance. Started out very unplanned. So I came up as a pianist on the jazz scene. I've been in New York for over 15 years now, and I put out a bunch of records under my name. Being basically jazz records, contemporary jazz records, and I felt that there was something else in me that needed to be expressed. But it's difficult when you're in the same environment and you are interacting with the same sort of scene to kind of break the mold and give yourself space to think of stuff that feels uncomfortable, maybe nonsensical in a way. But that's the beauty of creating, the beauty of art, is just to try a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, and let yourself sort of make a million mistakes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call them mistakes, they're just experiments. So one day I was on a flight from New York to LA to do actually a solo piano tour. That was about 5 years ago, I think. And I just had this vision that I needed to go to Iceland, and I knew nothing about Iceland. And I didn't really want to know anything about it. I just had this vision that it would be like Lord of the Rings or something, which it actually is, turns out. And I wanted to go in the winter, in a cabin, super like far away from everything, everyone, total cold, dark, Icelandic winter, and just completely focus on whatever it is that I would let myself create. And so I booked a cabin randomly for like 4 weeks. And so 2 months later, I packed a bunch of gear, some cameras as well. I had a Super 8 camera, I had a VHS, I had a drone, and brought as much stuff as I could fit in my suitcases, some keyboards and whatnot. No piano, which I thought was important, because I know the second I'm sitting at a piano, it makes me think of music a certain way.
Okay, yeah.
So I knew that being in a cabin, in complete silence, without having access to that instrument as a safety net, would make me do stuff differently, and it did. And so I ended up just writing a whole bunch of stuff. COVID happened. COVID hit 2 weeks later, so I ended up staying 4 or 5 months in Iceland, which was incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, I was. The cabin was very isolated, but it was a beautiful experience. I got to meet a lot of the locals, and it's a wonderful community that I'm a part of now. I get to go regularly. But that's how this project Foss came to be. Foss means waterfall in Icelandic.
Right.
I came back to New York, and with Jeremy Lucas, we basically produced the album, finished it, and then I edited all the footage that I had from Iceland, which is so gorgeous and ethereal, especially in the winter. And that became music videos, and then it became like a full-length film. And now it's a 60-minute film that basically runs as we're performing the music live. And the music is mostly electronic with some vocals.
And that's online, or how do you see that?
You can check foss.com.
Foss.com.
Yeah, you won't forget it.
Yeah.
And then you'll see like there are clips, there are a few extras. The record is not out quite yet.
Okay.
The record is called Shapeless, and it's going to be out soon.
Cool.
But you'll see there are like live concerts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That you can see.
I think it's quite interesting because I find that with writing that, you know, you have all the kind of sort of standard Beatles chords that created the kind of great pop songs, and when you're evolving as a writer, you're following this kind of formulaic thing, and then one day this light switches on where you go, oh, I'm gonna try that, or I'm gonna turn that backwards, and then I'm gonna do this, and then the real language of writing kind of comes to you, and I wonder when you're in a formulaic classical, probably not in a jazz sense, but like just classical music, very formulaic on the book, you know, and then when you go out and do something like Foss, that, as you say, it's, you know, it's a series of mistakes, but it's not, because it's your it's your kind of subconscious intention, whatever you're channeling.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's interesting whether you're coming from like a traditional pop songwriting format like the Beatles or whatever, or you're a jazz musician or you're a classical composer. The same thing happens, is that there are formulas, and then you just, there's a sort of a grid or a matrix that subconsciously sort of limits your creative options, and it's hard to break away from that. So no matter where you're coming from stylistically, it's a center of gravity that keeps pulling you back. So yeah, I think that what you just described is exactly right, and not just in the writing, and even in the production, post-production. Like Jeremy and I experimented for hours and hours in the studio. He's got an amazing studio, Sears Sound, in New York, with a ton of analog gear. It's a museum out there. It's really incredible, and Jeremy is very creative, great electronic musician, does a lot of live electronic music as well, and he's always trying to think of new ways to approach those machines.
Yeah.
So both in the treatment of vocals, production as a whole, the way we're using the synths, and all the way to the way he mixed the record, it's all pretty experimental. Not for the sake of being experimental, but we really gave ourselves a chance to try a lot of stuff out.
Yeah,
you know,
just let it flow.
Yeah.
I was watching. I mean, I think the takeaway from that, if you're creative and you're trying to work out how to do this stuff, is just don't be scared to try something really random and see if it fits. You know?
Absolutely. And I almost feel like anything can fit.
Yeah,
it's just having the sort of the bandwidth to deal with maybe the challenge that it is to make it fit. But it's very interesting. But I feel like this place, you know, Escape, is such it's an environment that's very conducive to that kind of creative process.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Same thing as me being nice and isolated. You're here, and it's just there's so much land around you, and it's so quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get the good. I guess you get sent ideas. I think with everything, and this is just through being out here for a long time, you get sent ideas, and then it's a question of whether you cultivate them or not.
Right.
And then someone else might cultivate it, you know, which is fine. Something flashed into my head, which was Arm Van Helden, who's a friend of ours, had said, oh, you know, I do a lot of this production at home, and then I just kind of, I tweak it, and then suddenly it's there and it lands, and he's like, and then I'm like, oh, no, I'm not going to touch it, like it's in place, you know.
Yeah.
And I imagine in the studio in New York, you guys were like, oh, let's do that, and suddenly you're like, that's it.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. It's a good way to put it, and to have the sort of respect and openness for the creative process, which is to let things sort of simmer, be chaotic for a while. Because the only other option to approach things really is to know where things fit before you even touch them. So they'll sound fine. I don't know if you'll ever get to a sense of magic, but everything will sound fine because, you know, I've made music my entire life. So at this point, I know enough about the art of creating such that you can create things that will always sound fine. But that's not what we're trying to do here. So as you said, it's, you know, really embracing the process of chaos for a while until something just slowly takes shape and just clicks.
Yeah.
And I never realized how for Foss in particular, how clear that process was until we had a few friends in New York who came by the studio, and they love what we do, and they were like, what have you been working on? So we're always working on stuff. There's a lot there's a lot of stuff on random hard drives, and we're pretty much done with a second album. And so we play them a couple of tracks that are done, like mixed and done. So they went through that entire process of chaos and chaos. Usually that's what happens for every Foss track. It's a lot of chaos, a lot of trying, and then slowly, as you said, some like the stars align, and we feel like, okay, now he's come to a place of rest. And by the way, when he gets there, I don't necessarily like what it sounds like, but I've learned to sort of remove myself from being the judge of what it should feel, sound like necessarily.
Take control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like a thing that has come to a resting place and that shines in a certain weird way, and I don't have to like it necessarily. I just have to accept that this is what he wanted to become.
That's where it is, yeah.
And I kind of let it go, and then move on to something else. So I played them a couple of tracks that were finished, quote unquote, and they're like, all right, great. And then, do you have anything else? So I said, yeah, I mean, we have a bunch of, they're close friends. I was like, yeah, we have a bunch of stuff, a bunch of material, but it's not finished. So
yeah.
To me, knowing what the process is, it's not that far off from being finished and that far off from being a track that would sound like the ones they just heard. But to them, when they heard the track, we put in this track and they're like, I feel like you put everything and anything and possible in the universe that in music into this track. And and it really hit me because I was like, actually not particularly, but you're hearing this track before it really gets a chance to sit, and then you clean the stuff. You clean up you basically get rid of all the stuff that doesn't need to be there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or what Jeremy does a lot, which I've learned to love, is that he actually tends to keep a lot of the stuff, but just makes it work in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
So, say he's gonna overdub some modular on one of the tracks. Either textures, or it could be something rhythmic, or he'll always do a pass, a full take, a full pass. Mm-hmm. He's always performing, It's not that thing of we're in the studio. It's all very controlled. So let me just do those 4 or 8 bars. The modular is fully ready. The rig is there. Just hit the space bar. Okay, cool. We got those 4. But he just doesn't work like that, and we never do with Foss. It's always layers of performances over a performance. So typically what he'll do is that he'll keep all of those layers and not really get rid of anything, but it's rare that he'd come to a point where he'd be like, this is really not working, or it's too busy, let's just mute this track. It happens once in a while, but mostly there's a sort of a real presence in the moment for every pass that we take on any of the instruments. And that's a full take. And then when it comes to mixing, then that's when things find their way and they kind of sit such that all of a sudden there's room to breathe again. Yeah. But stuff gets submixed, when even the stuff that doesn't really work gets submixed such that you always have sort of a dense texture. You can't really necessarily tell where it's coming from. Yeah. And I think it's quite magical. And the way Jeremy makes his stuff, by the way, is a performance. So he's one of those rare guys who's like, for Foss at least, really old school. He's got an old analog board and he's doing a pass basically. Like he's mixing live the way things used to be done, like 40, 50 years ago. And so every mix is going to be different. He's going to do a pass. He's like muting things and unmuting things on the spot to create a super dynamic mix. And so then he's done. He's like, that's the mix. And that's the cool song, Yeah. So it's kind of a performance all the way till the end.
Yeah. That's really cool to kind of get there in that fashion. I mean, in any song, it's whatever blows your hair back. It could be any number of outcomes to get there. But then you have that. And for the listener as well, to be able to go, wow, I'm listening to this record and it's just amazing to know how this was put together. I think that's super cool for music enthusiasts. Yeah. And I was thinking when you were saying about, space, we say out here the space between the notes, which we borrowed from Hutch, who's a famous or legendary engineer out here in the desert. But so I'm sort of interested in, your experience in big areas of nature where it's very quiet versus then you're in New York, but you're in a studio which is quiet as well. So you have different levels of brain activity going on in those spaces. Do you detect any difference between frantic life in the city, got to go to the studio and do this, or now I'm in the wilderness, trying to channel something?
Yeah.
Or do you get it the same in both places, do you think?
No, I think they're completely, as you said, completely different types of brain activity.
Yeah.
I'd say the reason I want to be in total isolation when I create, and I've been doing this after Iceland, and then rented a house out in Death Valley that was 3 hours away from the closest corner store. It was super isolated. The same process. The reason I do this is because the amount of aloneness and the amount of silence allow me to tap into my subconscious, essentially. And I sort of get into it knowing, okay, I'm going to have only so many weeks to do what I'm trying to do here. And so say I have like 3 weeks total in that place, in that space. Then I know that that's a time that I devote just to create. So there's nothing else happening in my life. I try to set that time aside. And the beautiful thing about creating is that it doesn't have to be good. It just have to happen.
Yeah, you just got to be
it just has
set
to
aside
happen.
the time, right?
Yeah, it just has to happen. So then I get into a zone where it's almost purely tapping into the subconscious, and it's like an output of just creating, without any editing of any kind. So just session after session,
right.
Tunes and just ideas and lyrics that are very nonlinear, but that makes sense to me at the time. And so I have all this stuff. Then I get into the studio, and that's when I start sort of looking at things, thinking, well, does this really work or not? And mostly the stuff actually works. It doesn't make that much sense at the time from a cognitive perspective, but there's a logic there. That's basically, there's an alignment in the subconscious that I think gives the music some backbone in some sense and a center of gravity. Yeah. And then it's just a matter of, how do you slowly shape this and what kind of sort of form he wants to take in the end. So that's what happens in the studio. It's another kind of freedom, but it's also very much the result of Jeremy and I interacting in the creative process of the post-production and the production. So when it's two people already, that's a very, very different scenario we're talking about. Yeah. As opposed to when it's just me, I'm literally just asking myself to quiet everything down. I meditate every single day, and I have for quite a few years now. And that really helps. And it's just really trying to tap into the subconscious and not worry about the outcome. Yeah. When you get in the studio, there's just something a little more tangible, mechanical. You're dealing with machines, you're interacting with,
It's evolving what you've begun with, right?
Yeah. So
kind of perversely, it'd be interesting to put you on Broadway for a day and just see what you wrote sitting in the middle of all the traffic,
Yeah, I've thought about this. I've thought about this too. That's something else too. Yeah. You'd almost have to be sort of, in a bubble. We're like feel completely like a complete observer. You know what I mean? So such that I don't know. Yeah, but it's cool. I've thought about it.
Yeah. We had interesting conversations earlier about space and about AI. And you have this interesting perspective that I would say that, some musicians are limited to music and they're there, but some people have a mind that's orchestrating a lot and seeing a lot at the same time, and also looking at a world view and going, oh, wow, what is this? What does that mean? And, I thought it was really fascinating how interested you are in the world around you.
Yeah.
As well. I'm sure there's sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm thinking too much about all this stuff, but...
Yeah, no, it doesn't seem to interfere really. There's that almost, but I can't help it. The universe is an exciting place. Why do I want to create? I mean, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. I was created by the universe. You were created by the universe. It's this giant machine that made us, and then will sort of push us to be in a different state after the life as we understand it. But even throughout life, it's always constantly challenging us and pushing us in a million directions. And so I find it very sort of natural to try to get to an understanding of the self, because that's how nature made me, and I'm trying to be mindful and respectful of that. but also an understanding of how the world is evolving. It's an incredible machine. I love surfing, and the way you look at a big wave, and you're on a wave, and I'm a shitty surfer, but
Okay.
I love surfing, and
Yeah.
I've been in the ocean for many years, but you look at a wave, and you try to read the wave, and it's such a fascinating sort of creature and phenomenon. It's so much bigger than you, especially on bigger swells, and I feel like, the world is like that, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, wow, like things are changing all the time, they're evolving, and how are people adapting to this, society is adapting to it, how art is adapting to it and responding to it, Yeah, to me it's just one giant ecosystem.
Yeah. I think if you're close to it and you're sort of channeling from the source with creative ideas and you're open to that, then there's that. You're probably more prone to being, quote unquote, awake, in the sense that you're able to see the world around you and go, wow, this is weird. When I moved here, for example, I'd been living in New York and I came straight here, didn't go past LA or anything. And I just had this conversation with the rocks on my first night. I went, if you don't kill me, I'll do right by you. It was such a strange conversation. And I had a night of freaking myself out and thinking there were people walking past and stuff,
That's cool.
But it was a real kind of chucked into the deep end for me in terms of a kind of awakening from that.
It does work though, You're in nature.
Does.
It's just you're in nature, and kind of it points you to the right direction pretty quickly if you sit with it,
Yeah. I think it's valuable for everybody. And we were talking a bit about the whole AI thing that's coming up, which is obviously very central to a lot of conversations, particularly podcasts and things like that.
Yeah.
But your take on that is one from what I understood, it was not a sort of fear as an artist that we could be taken over by it, but actually one of opportunity or a positive outcome, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty optimistic in terms of the things that it can do, and the problems that it can solve that we can't. Not our fault, we're just probably not equipped. But apparently we might be equipped just well enough to create an AI with a general intelligence, which is a crazy thing if you think about it. In other words, like, we are machines that are not smart enough to solve certain problems, but we're smart enough to create a machine that would be smart enough to solve those problems, which I think is a fascinating concept. Yeah, I have no idea. Like, I think, like most, we have no idea what what AI is going to look and feel like in 10, 20, 30 years. It also feels like it will follow a path and an evolution that's faster than anything that we've encountered so far as like the human species. And that's fascinating. Fascinating time to be alive. But I was also thinking in contrast to this, yesterday we did 2 sets, and we had a small group of people who came, and they drove 3 hours from LA just to be out here in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and they came to watch the show, and it makes you wonder why would they do this, and the answer I think is quite universal. They want an experience, and they want an experience that is fulfilling. They want to feel that they're present in the moment, so they need a moment of sort of real focus and quiet, and they also want to feel like they're bonding with friends, because we all need that. It's just we're social creatures, and I find it interesting because the era of the digital world has since the internet has just boomed, and it's not slowing down. And then we had social media and all that stuff, and we got VR headsets. Now we're gonna have AI, and we're gonna have Web3. It's impacted a lot of things in terms of how humans relate to each other. But the one thing that I find quite fascinating is that there's no slowing down in music festivals basically being created. People, getting tickets to see artists' lives, etc. And I find it so beautiful and fascinating that that all of the stuff, the social media stuff, all the stuff on your phone and all that, the interface basically between humans has not impacted the profound desire of humans to just gather, have a good time, be hanging out with friends, and sort of bond around a sort of a common experience. You know, when you sit there and you watching an artist you love, or you go on a trip to absorb whatever it is that your new culture, nature, landscapes, whatever, and you do that with friends. And this thing is there, and it's still here, and I believe it's always going to be here.
Yeah,
and that's a beautiful thing that contrasts with whatever AI is going to do.
Yeah, I think it's really about connecting. Being with each other in a moment that just exists right then.
Yeah.
And I look at the web. When we had the web at the beginning, we were all going, "Oh my God, what is this? What's it going to be?" Now you just say to someone, "What's the internet?" and they're like, "Oh, it's that, and it does this, and I use it for that." Now, admittedly, some people go down a rabbit hole and are spending 6 to 8 hours a day staring at it, which I can recommend giving up if you can. Just as you say, meditate in the morning, spend an hour, chill out, and then deal with your email for 30 minutes. Then don't spend all day staring at it, and it's actually very freeing. But without going down that pathway, the AI thing as well, I think we're looking at it, and a lot of people are getting their knickers in a twist about it and saying, "Oh my God," and Elon Musk this, and the whole world is going to, but actually it's a tool that we're going to plug into as humanity, and hopefully solve a lot of problems that we haven't been able to solve in the short amount of time that we've already existed.
Right.
So quite excited about that, really. But yeah, and then space was another thing that you were interested in, as in above us rather than around us, maybe.
I don't know. Inside us, above us, around us, everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the universe. It's just that it's kind of, we are like stardust. Truly, is something I always felt very connected to. But you asked me at some point, where else would I like to be, sort of like in isolation in a way, just to gain a new perspective on either myself or the world or whatever, such as, so as for me to be able to create something. And and going to space is something that since I was a kid, since I was very young, I've had a vision. This is the first time I'm making this public, by the way. I've always kept it to myself because it's. I got
to get this heavy. This was Virgin Galactic.
There you go.
You told me today that they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I think they had to.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, I think. But it's.
I didn't buy a ticket.
No, but the way to look at it is that it's still advanced understanding of how to use rockets and it pushed that technology forward. It pushed the industry forward, and so it's still a recycling of. It's not like it's gone. It's a recycling of, I think, technology and manpower and like whatever great minds works on this are probably working now with SpaceX or Rocket Lab or whatever.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the rocket guys are out in the Mojave Desert.
Right. Yeah.
Probably 100 miles from here. There's big rocket building centers, both for private and for the military.
Right.
And, I've been learning how to fly recently, and I keep seeing these drones going past me.
That's really.
And they're just practicing and checking it all out.
Yeah.
And actually, you can go out there to the boneyard. They have these massive aeroplane graveyards.
Oh man!
Where there's just hundreds of planes, so we fly in and you can
see. That's the kind of stuff I like to actually film and shoot. That's the kind of, because for Foss, I basically travel the world in very random places that have very striking, otherworldly looks.
Yeah.
And back to space, like this is that's kind of like the ultimate. That it's just so grand and it looks so stunning. All the stuff you see from like the Hubble telescope.
I guess you get that overview. People have always talked about overview, or that's become a thing that's fashionable. Let's say, of this moment that an astronaut for the first time sees Earth from space and has this kind of epiphany that it's a ball floating, out there. Which again, I think a lot of us forget. If we live in a city and there's no stars at night, and you're just in the grind every single day.
Yeah.
And you've been brought up with a little bit of religion just sprinkled in there to make sure you keep working hard.
Your
whole life.
Yeah, exactly. You lose perspective of like sort of the fundamentals. And where you live out here in Joshua Tree, basically, yeah, as you know, like the night's incredible, like the
Yeah.
stars, and it just. I remember when I was much younger thinking, a lot of people would pay like vast amounts of money to have an amazing view of whatever. You have an ocean view from your property or whatever it is. And I was thinking, man, wherever you are, if you don't have light pollution from the city, wherever you are, you have like prime universe view. And
Big time.
you look up, and the end, like the universe is there,
Yeah.
like billions of stars. It's so many, and it's so beautiful. Like if you really take a second to go past just there are stars, and really think, okay, well, there are planets and there are suns and there are,
Yeah.
and it's already there. It's already happening.
Yeah.
Like, as we are doing this and that and going, grocery shopping, it's already very much happening.
Yeah.
The grocery shopping is the small stuff, and the stars are the big stuff.
Yeah.
So
We sit out there and look up, and you can actually, if you look for a while, you'll start to see the depth in space as well.
Right.
So you see, you'll be like, oh wow, there's a string of stars that are going that way, and maybe that's an optical illusion as well. Maybe they're going the other way, but still, you just get engrossed by it.
yeah,
And,
I mean, I took a peek last night. I tried to take an extended look. I wasn't completely sober either, but maybe that helped. But
Yeah.
but either way you look at it. It's
Well, I've been
just
sober
incredible.
for 7 years, and honestly, this is the great awakening is being out here,
Yeah.
and the mystery for me is the whole thing. It's not. I don't need to get out of my mind or take any drugs or anything like that to kind of have that moment. Nature's the moment for me. I understand though some people need that kind of instant cleanse with maybe ayahuasca or any of the things that they're doing, which we don't do here, just because I like to try and keep the energy vaguely clean of any problems like that.
Yeah.
But nature's the real thing. It's like it's very unusual,
100%.
completely inexplicable by us right
Yeah.
now, really. So it's a special space. I've been trying to for a while work out how to share it better, more broadly, because I think the message of solidarity between artists and like-minded people is actually something that we don't bother to share. Maybe because people are shy and they're like, I don't want to force that on somebody,
Yeah.
But actually, Todd Rose, who's a friend and a data scientist, Harvard guy, says, a lot of people think the same way. We all think that we think differently because there's been all these things have been sewn in between us over the last 20 years to try and divide us all. But actually, most people do think the same way. And I'm interested in, without having 10,000 people here, because I did a festival in New York, which is what brought me to the States originally. Without all that traffic and all those people, how do you connect the artist that's here in their moment of creativity with the people that are interested in what they're doing? So yesterday we filmed in 360 as well, with the idea that down the line, when the headsets aren't so expensive or clunky, that anybody could have that moment.
Yeah.
You might not have to be turning around and saying, hi guys, this is my next song and I wrote it because of this, because as you say, the music speaks,
Yeah.
But the idea is that anybody in the world, no matter what they're going through or where they live, or if they have to work every hour of the day to make ends meet, could have that 30-minute break where they go,
Get that relief. Yeah. Yeah.
And to have that state-of-the-art visual experience, audio experience, but also to have, and this is what's so special and what I'm so grateful for, is that you brought your soul, that you've put your entire life into music to share that moment with the people that were there, and hopefully everyone else when we get to put this together in a way that works.
Yeah, and it really, I think it really did. And again, I think as an artist, as a performer, it makes a big difference when you know that these people traveled from pretty far just to get that experience. Like they're here to listen, they're here to really take it in, and so they are as much part of the performance as I am in a way, But from what you were saying just a few minutes ago, the thing that I love that I know you're creating here at Escape is that we know a lot of the same people outside of music as well, and I know you have that vision of just generally gathering great minds, people who are stoked on creating stuff and building stuff. It doesn't have to be art. I mean, I was gonna say it doesn't have to be art. To me, like a great scientist is an artist. But it doesn't have to be, say, music. It doesn't have to be film necessarily. It doesn't have to be performance art. But anything that you apply your mind to with enough love, passion, obsession will become art. And I know this is a place where, I feel like anytime I'd come by, just say, hey, I'd probably hang out with you and a bunch of people that either already know or that would be very happy to meet because they're sort of like on that path and trajectory of trying to shine a light,
I think if you can take away all the noise in any scenario, it gives people a chance to think. And when they think, there might be a moment where the silence is scary, and then there's a regrouping, and then there's a conversation. And if you bring the right people together for that experience, then you can come up with new ideas and ways of looking at things that you may not have found if you were in the city just running into somebody saying, hey, I saw you and blah, 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 I'm distracted.
Yeah.
I think there are kind of two things that right now that have been on my mind. One was I've been watching Elon on TV and also getting a lot of flack from people. And from my point of view, I'm hoping that what he's doing is because he has a genuine love for life and the whole experience and evolving it, because I think he already was rich enough to, as I said, have a harem of 100 wives and 50 boats if he wanted, or whatever, all the stupid stuff. But he's actually out there giving his time and trying to make it better. Now, I don't know if he'll succeed or not, but in my book, anybody that tries to make it better, particularly when they're not being paid anything, you've got to say, hey, just, thank you and good luck and God bless with what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think that's really key. And people that come here, we were talking the other day with someone about bringing, we've just been in Bhutan. We've been lucky enough to be twice, and we went to see Ed Sheeran playing there. And we were fortunate enough to meet the King, His Majesty, and he was such an interesting person, and he was taking photographs of everybody with his Leica whilst we were watching Ed Sheeran.
That's cool.
And I was like, this is so random that I hadn't really. I just said to my wife, hey, why don't we go on a crazy trip doing that instead of just going over there and doing that again? Which linked to what you were saying about the randomness of what you can decide to do. And so I'm hoping that at some point we might have some people from his world coming here
that'd be amazing,
to have conversations about what they're trying to achieve.
That'd be amazing.
That's kind of what we're doing here anyway, is as you say, it's musicians, creatives, but also just trying to find solutions together and share life and the greatness of what we've been, I suppose, privileged enough to stumble upon through hard work, but through the dice of good fortune.
But I know you've been working hard on the space for like over 10 years. It's showing. It's a very soulful place. It's very beautifully thought out and very mindfully put together.
None of it's really planned.
It has that sort of like organized chaos to it that I think is very conducive to productivity and creativity. So cool. Thanks again. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm hoping that everyone gets to enjoy the videos that we'll get around to editing.
Cool.
Where we'll be sharing it soon, no doubt.
All right, great.
Thanks, brother.
Excellent. Thanks, Ross. All right.
Cool.
And it's a wrap.
Okay, nice
My
job.
dude.
Nice job. Big white doggy song. White doggy, you're my very best friend. I loved you from the start. I love you till the very end. Just give